This podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello and welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 46 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We are both here because we believe that the more you know in advance, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions before a crisis hits.
Welcome to this week's show. Please relax, get yourself some cold iced teas, some nice cookies that go crunch, and thank you for spending the next hour with Charlie and me as we talk about the negative side effects on the body from being in pain at the end of life. This week's show is the second part of a three-part series about pain management with world-renowned pain management expert Patrick Coyne. Like the BBC, we see our show as offering entertainment, enlightenment, and education and divided into three halves to address each of these goals. Our main topics in the second half, well, in this case, the second and third half, so feel free to fast forward to that chat-free zone. In the first half, Charlie has a story about Japan's most famous ghost and a recipe you can take to your next funeral lunch. In the second and third half, we have an interview with Patrick Coyne about the harmful effects of pain at the end of life.
In our first half, foreboding depictions of this Japanese ghost story and others are the subject of the exhibition Staging the Supernatural, Ghosts and the Theater in Japanese Prints at the Smithsonian's National Museum of Asian Art. Throughout Japanese cultural history, the boundary between the real world and the world of supernatural beings has been regularly porous. Certain sites, states of mind, or periods in a lunar cycle made humans particularly vulnerable to ghostly intervention. The Edo period, 1603 to 1868, was a crucial stage in the development and solidification of ideas about the supernatural. Many of the beliefs that gained popularity at this time are still held as conventional wisdom in Japan today. According to Roger Catlin, for centuries, ghost stories are a large part of Japanese culture, especially in the summer. The over 50 works on display, created from the 1700s to the 1900s by Japanese artists, show the enduring power of woodblock print art and the stories that the art represents. Coming out of the theater traditions of kabuki and no, the prints proved equally as popular as the performances. Yosuya Kaiden is a story of the ghost of Oiwa, the faithful wife who returned as a ghost to haunt her murderous husband. It was told in 1825 kabuki theater production of Ghost Stories of Yokusawa. Also known as the Lantern Ghost, it is one of Japan's most famous ghost stories. It tells the story of the vengeful spirit of a young woman betrayed by her husband. In the beginning of the story, Oiwa is married to a samurai named Ieman, but she was very unhappy because her husband was a liar and a thief. Oiwa's only hope for ending her marriage to the cruel and dishonorable samurai Ieman was her father. On following her, Ieman ran into Oiwa's father and killed him. He lied and told Oiwa that her father had been murdered and he would avenge his death if she would return home with him, which she did. Soon after, Oiwa had a child and became quite ill. Ieman grew tired of her and became very resentful. He was actually more interested in the beautiful granddaughter of the doctor who lived next door. The granddaughter soon fell in love with Ieman and wanted to marry him. Her father, the doctor, conspired with her, and he prescribed a cream to treat Oiwa's sickness. In fact, it was a poison, and when she used it on her face, she became horribly disfigured. At this point, Ieman's hatred for her grew even stronger, and the doctor convinced him he should marry his granddaughter. Having no good reason to divorce Oiwa, Aemon tried to set her up to be raped, but the would-be rapist found her too ugly and instead told her of her husband's plan. He also showed her a mirror, and for the first time she saw her disfigured face. She was horrified by her own appearance and desperately tried to cover her face with her hair. As she moved her hair, it began to fall out in bloody clumps. In a fit of madness, she grabbed a sword and stabbed herself to death, cursing Aemon until her last breath. Aemon was overjoyed at the news of his wife's death, with Mage Oiwa's servants suspicious, so Aemon murdered him and then nailed both his and Oiwa's bodies to doors and threw them in the river. He told everyone that Oiwa and the servant had been having an affair, and so he was then able to marry again. And Oiwa's curse began. Lying in bed beside his new bride, Aemon rolled over to be confronted with the hideous disfigured face of his late wife's ghost. He grabbed his sword and waved it wildly toward the ghost of Oiwa, realizing too late that he had actually murdered his new wife. He ran next door to see his father-in-law, the doctor, and was approached by the servant's ghost. Again, he used his sword to attack the ghost, and instead found that he had murdered the doctor. Aemon fled his home, but wherever he went, Oiwa's ghost followed him. She called out to him in his dreams. Her hideous face haunted him relentlessly, and she even appeared in all the lanterns that lit his way. Eventually, Aemon was driven completely insane, and Oiwa finally had her revenge. She returns in various forms to seek revenge and kill anyone associated with her husband. In the end, however, it is Oiwa's brother who kills Aemon to avenge his sister's spirit. In the artwork included in this podcast, the ghost of Oiwa has a sulky face that gives a haunting sensation. This is in addition to the sparse hair, sad bloodshot eyes, and eerie eye bags that droop from her face, probably from the effects of the poison. Though the supernatural had long been part of Japanese culture, the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, and this specific production gave permanent prominence to the genre, says Kit Brooks, co-curator of the exhibit. The production toured more extensively than earlier variations and featured the compelling special effects of flames and actors spurting blood and flying via wires. Kabuki, which originated in the Edo period, was known for its stylized performances and intricate special effects that made it a popular entertainment for broad audiences. As with current theater productions, selling posters from a play, Kabuki shows produce pictures for sale made from woodblock prints. These colorful, vivid examples rarely survive after nearly 2 centuries, especially the prints that involve paper flaps that lift up, meant to reflect complicated stage effects. One such elaborate woodblock print in the exhibition, made in 1861 by Utakawa Unisada, shows the body of Oiwa pulled to the surface with a fishing hook, and, by raising the flap, the body of a second corpse, a servant whose fingernails kept growing after his death. The effect was even more effective on stage, since both corpses were portrayed by the same actor during a quick costume change. People are encouraged to also contemplate the supernatural in the summer. In Japan, summer is the ghost time period, Brooks says. People tell ghost stories in the summer because it's hot and sweaty and humid, and they make you shiver, which makes you cold. Welcome to summer. Our recipe this week brings death by chocolate to a new level, hot chocolate lasagna. This recipe is perfect for your next funeral lunch. Hot chocolate lasagna is a rich, no-bake dessert made with whipped cream, hot chocolate mix, and instant pudding, all on top of a chocolate crust and topped with marshmallows and another drizzle of melted chocolate. Bon appetit! Please go to our webpage for this week's recipe for hot chocolate lasagna and additional resources for this program. Everyone Dies is offered at no cost, but is not free to produce. Many of you contact Marianne because of her expertise and her ability to explain complicated issues in everyday terms. So please contribute what you can. Your tax-deductible gift will go directly to supporting our nonprofit journalism so that we can continue to remain accessible to everyone. You can also donate at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org. Or at our website, or at our site on Patreon, www.patreon.com, and search for Everyone Dies. Marianne?
Hello and welcome back to the second half of Everyone Dies. I'm back with Patrick Coyne, who is a consultant and assistant professor at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, South Carolina. And we're doing a series with Patrick, 3 podcasts talking about pain management and the issues that the public need to be aware about when having pain managed at the end of life. And today, we're going to be focusing on the harmful effects of pain management at the end of life. Now, opioids, which morphine's one of those, is a typical standard of treatment to manage end-of-life pain. But many people are resistant to using these meds. So today we wanted to talk about this and how the end of life can be negatively affected by not using pain medications. Our hope is that people will be better prepared for their use and have well-managed pain and a peaceful death. And so many times in my practice, Patrick, and you can talk to us about if this has been your experience, is that patients or family members would say, "Oh, we're not ready for that yet. We're not ready for morphine yet." Have you heard that from patients?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a strong belief among many patients and families that when you start opiates, your time is limited, like hours to minutes, and probably because we started too late. Some interesting studies from the early 2000 era that demonstrated patients who actually got the opiates lived longer than those who did not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important to understand that the pain medications do a lot to help the body when you're having a lot of pain. They're allowing you to keep moving because the pain isn't keeping you in bed or not taking deep breaths. And we know that, the old Adam that pain doesn't kill you, but I actually believe it can in a frail patient or in a young child. And there's studies that would support that as well. And so we know that if we manage pain well, patients have a less risk of getting pneumonias. They have less risk of getting blood clots. They take deeper breaths. There's less risk of strokes. So there's a lot of things that when pain isn't well managed, your body is working really hard and it's not able to accomplish things that you may want to. There's a higher incidence of depression. And how can you enjoy life if every moment is suffering? And the pain medications are good at managing that. And so you have time to be with your family and friends and to really do the things that you want to do in the time that you have. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of people have that feeling that if I take the pain medication, my time will be cut short. And I'm actually on the other side of the fence here. If you don't take the pain medication and it's suggested, your time may be cut short.
So what do you say to the patients who say to you, I just really don't like to take medicine. I don't even like to take an aspirin, and now you're asking me to take an opioid.
Well, I mean, the first thing I want to do is understand why someone wouldn't want to take it, because it could be different for everyone. Mm-hmm. But the other part of it, I think.
Well, can you first? What are some of the things that people say to you when you ask them why you don't want to take this?
Some of the things that I'll hear is, I'm afraid I'll get addicted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid I'll get confused and I won't have time. I'm afraid it will hasten my dying. A lot is, when hospice came in, they started morphine and my dad was dead in an hour. I mean, those are the stories that you hear. All of those and culturally, I'm strong. I don't need it. So it may be a sign of weakness. So I'm going through this because God wants me to. So I'm not taking pain medications. I mean, these are some of the stories I've heard.
An additional one that I've heard, and it might be, well, you're in the South too, but that I need to have a head clear when I meet my maker. Have you heard that one?
I've never heard that one.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that.
I have a feeling, though, when you meet your maker, the pain medications aren't going to have anything to do with it because you'll be gone.
Well, you never know, Patrick, but actually, actually, I have heard that, and
this is important while you have a team, and this is where if it's quite spiritual or religious, I'm utilizing my chaplain too. I had a lady that I took care of, must be 10 or 15 years ago now, that her daughter brought her in, and it was quite clear she was in severe pain. She was grimacing, moaning, and I asked her how her pain is, and she kept saying it's okay. And I asked her daughter to step out, and we talked for a little while, and it really became apparent, and she was uncomfortable, could barely move. And she just said to me, this is a punishment from God for an abortion I had 30 years ago, and I just need to accept this. Mm-hmm. And our chaplain had a bigger impact on that lady than I ever could.
Right.
But just those are the kind of situations you can walk into. And I'm never going to make anyone take anything they don't want to, but I want them to make a decision that's informed, and it's not based on myths, and it's based on evidence.
And that's kind of, I guess, a tough one with the religious aspect of it, in terms of, well, here's the evidence. I've also heard patients say, well, I'm not going to need this pain medicine because I'm going to be healed. I know that God is going to heal me. And I've always struggled with that answer. Tell me what you usually say to that, and then I'll tell you what I've learned to say.
I'm usually kind of going, tell me why you think you need to suffer. I want to understand their concept of this, because there are some religions that we see commonly where I am, where if you don't suffer, you don't get to heaven. And so families will refuse opiates. And I have been, myself and my chaplain have been minimally successful. And that's their religious belief. I'm not going to change it, nor do I want to. I just want them to have information so that they make a good decision for them. But I really don't want them to suffer, but I'm also not going to keep them out of heaven because that's their belief.
Right. Well, I was talking more relative to there's going to be a miracle, and so I'm not going to need this medicine. And I talked with a group of chaplains, a long time ago, and I said, I'm really puzzled about how to respond to this. And one of them said to me, there's miracles all the time, but we don't get to choose what the miracle is, and we don't get to choose where the miracle happens. And so the miracle might happen after you die, when you're with God.
Sure.
And
that's a great response. I like that.
And every time I've ever said that to somebody, that whole, there's going to be a miracle, I don't have to do this or I don't have to do that. And I thought that sort of very consistently people kind of stop and think and say, actually, that's right. You don't get to choose your miracle, and you don't get to choose when it happens. So it gives like this other perspective that I can take no credit for, but a wise chaplain gave me. So in terms of other harmful effects of pain, Do you have others?
The ones I think of the most are difficulty with breathing and chances of pneumonia. I also think that depression is huge in anxiety, which I think causes more suffering, and it's kind of as the pain gets worse, the depression gets worse. It's just a bad circle, and anxiety too. And how can you make peace with your friends and families if you're in too much pain to think about anything except how bad you feel, or how much it hurts to breathe, or how much it hurts to move? And so I worry about the patients who are suffering that way. We also know that if you're comfortable, you tend to do more. And the more you do, like the more you move, the longer you live. And so why not live comfortably and live longer?
And also, don't you find that people have a better appetite, that they sleep better, that they're just, you talk about quality of life, but just those real concrete things that if you're in pain, you're not going to sleep well.
No, you're not going to sleep well, and it's hard to eat when your whole body hurts because your body's fighting the pain, and you're kind of in a fight or flight, as they would say, or running a marathon. You just don't want to eat, and if you're comfortable, you may have the ability to get back and eat. And so there's so much that goes on with this, and I think it's really misunderstood. And I hate to see patients and their family suffering because we've done such an inadequate job of pain management, or patients have a misunderstanding of what the medications are going to do. And we know when we start some of these medications, any of the opiates, it's not uncommon for people to get really drowsy for the first day. And it may be because they're so comfortable, it's the first good sleep they've had.
Right.
But that goes away. Of all the side effects from the pain medications, the only one that stays is constipation, and that's something we can easily manage.
Right. So have you other ideas or other things that you think that our listeners need to know about what pain does to our body, untreated pain does to our body or our relationships? So like people can be more irritable, when they're hurting.
Sure. Yeah, they're more anxiety.
They're cranky.
Yeah, and when you're depressed, what do? You withdraw. So you're not talking to your friends and families. If your anxiety is out of control because of pain, you can't concentrate. So you can't have those conversations. And we also know that people with uncontrolled pain have higher incidences of stroke. Constipation, really, it just impacts the entire body. Higher infection rates. It really does everything. Pain does everything but let you enjoy life, and it makes your life shorter. Other reasons to manage the pain. We're still learning a lot about this and ways it does it, and there's different types of pains, and some of it's going to be really well controlled with the opiates, but some are going to need different medications, and that pain can be very different too because it can be very unpredictable.
So that's a good point, because people might say, well, I'm already on this. Why do you want me to take this different pain medicine? And
right. And there's different types of pain, and that's what really everyone should be trying to figure out. And some are more responsive to medications that you may not anticipate. So I use antidepressants a lot because they help manage nerve pain. So that's the advantage of them. But if I didn't have a discussion with the patient and the family, they may think, oh, he just thinks I'm depressed or crazy. And really, I'm trying to treat a nerve type pain. And so it all goes back to the education that has to go on with this. It requires a lot of education, and it's a scary time for everyone. For patients
Right.
and families taking that medication is, I understand the fear that goes with it. And that's why I want patients to ask a lot of questions, or their family, and to be comfortable, because it's, in the long run, if someone's offering to prescribe it, they're trying to do good, not harm.
Well, I think that people in general don't know what questions they should be asking. So if they go to see a palliative care specialist or a pain management specialist, they're sitting there saying, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be asking about.
Sure. So, I mean, there are a lot of good questions I would ask is, how often will I take it? What should I expect with the first 2 or 3 doses? What are side effects that I should call you about? What are side effects that will likely go away in a day or 2? What if I can't afford this medication? What other options exist? What if I can't find this medication? What other options exist? Is there someone else in your family that I should be talking to who may be a caretaker or may be more nervous?
Right, because you can have, I had a person and her husband were both police officers. And I did my education with her, and she said, so now who's going to talk to my husband? Because he had the same reservations, but he didn't come in for her appointment, So I said, well, have him call or have him come in and let's talk about it. What would you have done?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of these is, I do a lot of FaceTime visits, so that family members on the phone with us as we have it. So for me, that's pretty common to have a third or fourth party on the phone while we're doing all of this. In fact, that's more my norm, because I want everyone to hear the same thing at the same time. Because you know how one person hears it, the next person hears it, and by the time the third or the fourth family member hears it, it's a whole new story.
Right.
And if I can get everyone there, and, when I write my notes, I give a copy of the education we talked about. Because I really want it to be pretty concrete. And then I tell them, if they have questions, there are good websites and there are bad websites. And so, I'd go to trustworthy websites, the Mayo Clinic, the American Cancer Society,
Everyone dies.
Yeah, everyone dies. I mean, I think it's important to go to trusted websites, but you can find anything on the web depending what you want to find.
Right. And that's the thing, is even with groups, is that you'll see all kinds of non-scientifically based, if that's good English or not, I don't know, information that you could have a full-time job, debunking these things. And that's why, we want to be able to say, we could say these are evidence-based. We're going by the science, we're going by the experts, and none of it is, I don't know, taking Laetrile or whatever. But although, is Laetrile back in fashion now?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, good, because we don't recommend that. So, what haven't I asked you about the harmful effects of pain that you think that our listeners need to know?
I think there's a lot of things that are important for a patient family to tell me about. I'm going to ask a lot of questions about your pain. I'm going to ask, how bad is it on a 0 to 10 scale? But I'm going to ask, where is it? What makes it better? What makes it worse? I'm asking, when you take the pain medication, does it take the pain away? Does it decrease it? Does it do nothing? I'm going to ask what side effects you've seen. I like pain diaries. Tell me 3 days of what your pain was like. Where was it? How did the medications work? And I also am trying to figure out, do you need to be on a long-acting pain medication so that you're not waking up at 2 a.m. with pain?
Mm-hmm.
I also want to know if you're waking up in 2 a.m. with nightmares. Maybe I need to change your pain medication. So all of this is important conversations because it's going to impact your quality of life. But in the big picture, the pain medications should do you great good and not cause any harm. That's our goal. But everyone's a little different. And so I want to hear from you. I want to have you ask those questions. I want you to think about a pain diary.
Great. And I think what we'll do is we'll put in the show notes an example of a pain diary so that people can just click on it and get that and make that a little bit easier. Well, Patrick,
I think that would be great.
Patrick, thank you so much for talking with us about this topic. And for our listeners, this gives you kind of this picture about when you go to your nurse practitioner, your physician, your palliative care, whoever it is that's managing symptoms, when they talk about pain medicine, they're not doing that just to throw a pill at you and, get you on your way. It's because it has the potential of a tremendous effect on your quality of life. Patrick, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you to Patrick Coyne for that fascinating interview. Please stay tuned for the continuing saga of Everyone Dies, and thank you for listening. This is Charlie Navarrete, and from the host of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, a coma is more than sleep, less than death.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.